Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Pronews 7 Talk program where we devote the lion's share of our newscast to the discussion of a key topic in the news that affects us all. Tonight, that topic is abortion in Texas. The debate on that issue has been around for years and years, but a new round got started last week in Austin. That is when Governor Perry signed the measure that didn't make it through the first special session of lawmakers, but did when Perry called them back for a second. It is House Bill 2, and its key features are banning abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy, requiring abortion clinics to meet the same standards as hospital-style surgical centers, and mandating that a doctor have admitting privileges at a hospital within 30 miles of the facility where that doctor performs abortions. Supporters say the law would improve patient safety and hold abortion clinics to safer standards. Opponents say it amounted to an unconstitutional attack on legal abortion in Texas, and that many of the restrictions were found to be medically unnecessary even by doctors' groups. The first restrictions won't take effect until 90 days after this session ends in Austin later this month, but it seems likely that lawsuits will be filed before any of them have to be enforced. If you haven't yet, get a question to us through Facebook, Twitter, or connectamarillo.com. We have this panel of three to consider your questions this evening. Stephanie Frosto, the Director of Respect Life Ministries for the Catholic Diocese of Amarillo. Claudia Stravato, longtime women's rights activist and past CEO of Amarillo's Planned Parenthood office. And Dr. Brian Eads, an Amarillo gynecologist whom you may also recognize as an Amarillo City Commissioner. Panel, thank you very much for being here for tonight's discussion. I think I want to get it started with about 30 seconds from each of you on your reaction to the new law, the debate to the last couple of months, the signing last week, and your thoughts about its impact from your perspective. Stephanie, we'll start with you.
Well, it gives me great hope. It really does for the people that have spoken up, and especially for those who have no voice. To be an advocate in the state of Texas is a great honor, privilege, and blessing, and so many of us take it for granted. And I'm really surprised and grateful for the many youth that have turned out. It's really been very hopeful to see them get involved in politics. So I am just thrilled. Proud to be a Texan, Jay.
Claudia, you were down there in Austin for much of the debate and the demonstrations and such. Your reaction to what happened?
Well, of course, I was very disappointed for a number of reasons. Constitutional reasons, separation of church and state reasons, the absolute refusal of the legislature to base any of its opinions on science or the recommendations or suggestions of the medical field. Very concerned about the fairness and social justice issues involved. And the legislative process was lacking in every way. I spent 25 years of my life down there and have sat right there on that floor where a lot of it was going on.
And Brian, as you a gynecologist, hearing this debate and all the things that were going on with new clinics and new restrictions and hospital privileges, that kind of thing, what's your take?
Well, I think above all, we've got to first take care of the patients and do what's best for the patients. We got two patients here. We got the mother and we've got the child. And what's happening currently, because these services aren't provided in the Texas Panhandle, is they're being provided in Lubbock or other surrounding communities. And then these patients are really rather being set adrift to have their complications and their outcome, and they're landing at ERs, family practice offices, OB-GYN offices. And while we try to provide compassionate care for them, there's not another procedure in the world where patients are set adrift to be cared for by somebody else.
Let's get to the first Facebook comment. First, I want to talk about a news item that said both men and women, especially low-income minorities, rely on some of the clinics around Texas like this for services like contraception, STD testing, even cancer screenings, and only 1 in 4 women in Texas are insured. Jessica on Facebook says, now, how are women who can't afford insurance supposed to get birth control or supposed to get this kind of a care? We'll start with you as a doctor.
Well, these are really rather separate issues because there is insurance coverage and there's Title X coverage and there's Medicaid coverage, especially for women who become pregnant, that are really as a lower standard than what Medicaid is generally. And so there's a lot of services still available. The vast majority of contraceptive services and cancer screening services for women in this state are not provided by clinics that are also providing abortion services.
Claudia, the fact is some of these clinics are going to have to close and take a lot of money to get up to snuff.
And almost, in fact, every Planned Parenthood clinic, wherever it's located, provides all of those services, and so do the health department programs where they offer clinics. They also offer all those services. And that's the problem with them closing down, is that in some of those rural areas, they're all that's there. So poor women are the ones who are losing out.
Stephanie, what kind of an attitude does Respect Life Ministries, the diocese, come back when somebody says we're going to lose health care services for women with all this? Is that what you think is going to happen as well?
I don't believe so. I think there's a lot of clinics out there that a lot of women don't utilize, and a lot of doctors out there are losing business because of these clinics. You know, and one of the beautiful things is the fact that birth control is a choice. I don't believe tax dollars should be funding these choices.
We're ahead of schedule, but we're done with segment number 1. We still have 2 to go. Please stay with us for more of our Pro News 7 talk on abortion in Texas. Welcome back to the second segment of tonight's Pro News 7 talk, discussing the topic of the recently signed Texas law restricting abortions and mandating changes for clinics where abortions are performed. Panel, let's get to an issue that several people addressed today on social media, including Yvonne and Mike. Yvonne, through email, said, if the pro-life movement is really pro-life, then why is the mother's life not as sacred as the unborn fetus? The mother should have the right to do with her body what she wants without interference from anybody else, especially the government. Does this country really want to allow religion to dictate our laws? If so, then whose religion gets to decide what's legal? And then Mike on Facebook says, it seems the phrase, it's a free country, is officially dead, if this is all true. Your take on these remarks, Stephanie?
My answer would be, what about the choice of the life within the womb? That's life. And if we are defending life, it should be both for mother and child. One life is not valued over another. And in instances where the life of the mother is at threat, it's less than 1%. So abortion is more because of it's a convenience and it's because of choice.
Okay. And Claudia, the government interference in all this, the woman's right to choose, your take?
Well, I was just telling Dr. Eads before that we got on the air that I read all of the ACOG, AMA, TMA, and THA opinions on this, and they say that the 20-week is arbitrary and was set only to remove access to many for the process. And 20 weeks is arbitrary because a woman, I saw this happen many times at Planned Parenthood, a woman would come in at 6 months never having had prenatal care, thinking everything was fine, and then amniocentesis and sonography revealed a fatal fetal anomaly. So you can't just have an arbitrary 20-week and serve your patient.
Okay. Dr. Eads, your take, the government and the woman's right to choose?
Well, I think the state has an overriding concern when you look at a lot of the research that babies can feel pain at that point and that their needs are not adequately being considered as younger members of our society. And I feel like that it's not just about when a baby is viable, but it's about whether it would be considered a form of torture to go in and physically remove a child like that. And so we're very conflicted in the medical community because we do not feel like the government should be inspissated between a patient and a physician. But there are times when the state has overriding concerns in that regard.
Let's start with you on this. A very interesting question, I thought, from Amber on Facebook. It's very simple. So will they now make adoption an easier process? Has this been talked about at all during the discussion of this bill, that adoption might enter into all this?
Well, and let's reason together. Think about in the last century when a pregnancy outside of marriage was considered to be social suicide. That is no longer the case. Almost half the babies that are born outside the marital relationship. So why indeed do we not consider these pregnancies to be important and not consider the need to terminate them, not relax rules on adoption, maybe allow people more anonymity in being able to put their baby up for adoption, not necessarily pursue open adoption on all occasions. And that's another way in which I think we all could agree is an opportunity.
Okay. Claudia, we talked about that before the show also, about fair adoption through all this process.
Yes, a friend sent me the latest editorial by the Baptist Standard, and they raised that issue that if the legislature was going to do this, then why didn't they make adoption laws easier to comply with? Why didn't they fully fund Medicaid, go into the expanded Medicaid? Why are they agreeing with the cuts in food stamps? Why are they not funding schools adequately? In other words, the Baptist Standard said the Texas legislature acts in a way that is not consistent with the teachings of Jesus because they have not addressed those things that would support those babies.
Okay, and Stephanie, from the church's aspect, the Diocese of Amarillo, where does that adoption philosophy come in?
Adoption, unfortunately, has been forgotten due to abortion. A lot of women who have suffered abortions have shared that because they felt pressured or convinced or coerced to have these abortions, they never were given the option for adoption. So I'm hoping that this will help with a lot of adopting, especially here in the Panhandle. There's a great need for it, and people need to consider and really pray and discern.
I know there's a question that came up about why is rape and rape victims and incest victims not covered in the new law, and I want to get to that right after this break as our discussion continues. And we welcome you to our third and final segment of our Pro News 7 Talk tonight, looking into the new Texas law on abortions. Panel Jessica brings up a point about something that was not included in the new law. She asks on Facebook, what about rape victims or victims of childhood incest? Do you think it's still wrong then? I noted that the Democrats offered 20 amendments to the bill before it passed, including exceptions for rape and incest, but the Republicans turned them all back. I'll start with you, Stephanie. Do you think it was wrong not to include rape and incest in this new law?
Women who have been victimized by sexual assault deserve our full support, without a doubt. And many of these women have begun to ask their legislators for a chance to tell their side of the story. Studies also show that most do not want an abortion, and those who do have an abortion report that it only increases their trauma. So abortion here is not the answer.
Okay. Claudia, about the rape and incest, do you wish that were included?
Of course, and had they included any of the amendments, we might not have come to this terrible struggle that we came to. What the author of the bill, the House author, Representative Laubenberg, said, which was the most ignorant thing I've ever heard in my life, and it went around the world. She said, well, those people, those women could go to the hospital and get a rape kit, and those rape kits cleaned you out where you couldn't get pregnant. There's never been a more ignorant statement ever made in this state. It was just awful. And when you have people like that sponsoring these bills, that in itself makes the bill not credible.
Dr. Eads, I have to imagine you see these kinds of victims in your practice, and how you handle those has got to be something that's quite emotional.
We do, and there's other issues too here. There are other kinds of birth control. One of them is called Plan B, which is not an ideal option either, because it rarely leads to things like abortion. But in Northwest Texas Hospital, when somebody's the victim of rape, they're often offered Plan B, so that if indeed they are in a stage of their cycle where they're potentially going to have a pregnancy occur, that can all be averted. So we do have other options short of abortion that are better long-term for the patient.
Not sure how many more questions we'll get in, but I know I wanted to get this one in, because yesterday a judge in Alabama delayed a law that is very close to what Texas passed and Texas got signed last week. So I have to ask, abortion rights advocates believe the new law is unconstitutional. Governor Perry has said he is confident it is constitutional. My questions, and I'll start with you first, Doctor. What are your opinions on the validity of the law, and do you foresee a long, drawn-out legal process that would delay implementation of it anyway?
Well, it's not unlike a law we had last legislative session called the sonogram law, where they said that you had to show a woman a sonogram and tell her what you were seeing before you did the abortion. And that was originally challenged and overturned, but then it went on appeal, and a judge affirmed that. And so this is going to be a long tit-for-tat process where we see what provisions of this bill ultimately pass and what is overturned. And we'll know in the next 18 months.
Yeah, Claudia, what do you think? Is it going to be a year, 2 years before this?
Well, Texas has a problem because of the Fifth Circuit. And the Fifth Circuit is absolutely anti-abortion, and we can't get anything past that. That's why you found other cases in the last 3 to 6 months for 6 weeks, 12 weeks, and 20-week bans have been ruled on, and they've been stopped. So Texas is in a unique district that has problems with the federal circuit court.
Okay, and Stephanie, you thinking about that, about how long this may go through the courts before it finally has come to some conclusion?
I think as long as it takes. I mean, we need to really carefully look into these bills and into these laws and really truly commit to the sanctity of all life, both mother and child.
And quickly, James on Facebook was asking, is it true that 63% of Texans are against the ban? He was wondering if that's a true statement. And my companion question is, what effect really should a poll like that have on an issue like this? Let's start with you on that.
I think it says a lot, because there's a lot of pro-life people out there, and most of America is pro-life. A lot of times we don't get the opportunity to express how we truly believe. And when it comes to the life of the mother and the child, that's what we're called to do, is to defend our neighbor.
63%? Does that make sense?
I think it's a little bit high given recent polls, but on the other hand, I don't think that polls should rule. But on the other hand, I don't think that Stephanie has the right to tell me and other people in various religions who do support the right of a woman to choose that she has the right to impose her religious beliefs on me.
And
So
Brian,
who cares what the polls
does
say?
that 53% sound accurate, and should it really rule in this case?
Well, I think how it depends on how you phrase the question. You can get all kinds of numbers all over the board depending on how you present the patient to the data to the individual.
Okay. That's about the time we have. So Stephanie and Claudia and Brian, I really, really appreciate you being here.
Thank
It's a tough
you.
issue to talk about and get emotional about, as we all do, but I do appreciate you being here to share your thoughts for this very important evening. Thank you very much. Brian James has the weather for you right after this break.